Up on the bench today we have a, what can you say, how cool is that? And how blindingly bright too. But yeah, I have to assume this was made by Lafayette, because this does not look homebrewed. This looks, made professionally, by a company. And I can't see somebody, going through the hassle of putting Lafayette's name on something, so I'd have to say this was probably built by Lafayette. And what this is an antenna switch, a really big antenna switch. 20 positions, as a matter of fact, with built-in SWR meter. So I saw this thing, and yeah, it was one of those, I gotta have it, man. I ain't never seen one of these, especially one with 20 positions. I mean, I've got, what's that up there on the wall? Those are, dual 6-position switches I use for switching here at the bench, and then radio rooms I've got other ones. But most of those are like 6 or 8 positions. Some of them might have 2 6 or 8 position switches in them, but yeah, 20 switches. So you can see this is old school, man. Old push buttons. So when I saw this, I really wasn't sure how it was set up inside, because the back doesn't really tell you what's going on here. So, I mean, it's obvious input, and then you have, 20 connections here. Now, they say input. Actually, you'd kind of want that actually to be the output, unless you want one radio hooked up to 20 antennas. You'd actually do it the other way around, and it's a switch. It doesn't care what direction it goes. Yeah, actually, the SWR meter might, but in any case, so you could hook up 20 radios to this, and that's the one antenna. But this kind of threw me for a loop. Now, the seller had said this was a power strip, and I looked at it like, well, I don't know, it does have battery connections, positive and negative, 12-volt DC, but it doesn't really tell you what the heck are these things. It just labeled 1 through 20, so obviously each of these is paired to an antenna jack. But what does it do? So I haven't cracked it open yet, so let's crack it open and see what's actually inside. I'm kind of interested, because like I said, I saw this and it was like, oh man, I've just got to have that. Actually, I could use like 20 of these. I could hook up a large majority of my radios all at the same time if I had 20 of these things. That would just be sweet. Actually, what I'd need would be 20 more exactly, and this one. So I could hook up this one, have the other 20 boxes run into this, and then you could select which box with this, and oh yeah, man. But just having one, that's cool enough. Let's see what we got here. Because I don't know if it's relays or if it's actual push-button contact switches. And that's about all the longer the wires are. Yeah, it's okay. It's normal push-button switch, so there's no relays. You can see down in there. Okay, so yeah, okay, that's what that does. That's why I wasn't sure about that rear terminal strip. So it looks like... Man, how in the heck did they get this thing together? Somebody must have had really tiny hands and skinny arms. Unless you... maybe that's what you do. You pop the rear loose, fold it in, maybe. Because I don't see it coming apart like that. The wires that go actually to this terminal strip, they're rather short, where they go up and hook up to that switch assembly. Let me get the back popped off here. We'll see if we can get all of this extracted from the housing. But yeah, man, did they ever pick a bright color. Now, can I get... Yeah, there we go. There. You need to be a yoga master to... How in God's name did they get this thing put together? Holy smokes, people. Don't lay over any more than that. Okay, this is one of those things where you just want to smack some mechanical engineer upside the head, whoever designed this thing. How in God's name are you supposed to... There we go. Good grief. Ha! Success. Man, talk about a tight squeeze. So there it is. So, yeah, okay. So that's what they've got. So we have, you look at the switch assemblies there. They kind of remind you, if you've never seen this type of switch before, it's basically the same type of switch contacts used in a lot of base station microphones. So if you're familiar with like Turner microphones, they use switch contacts like this. But so you can see as you engage, and it's what it's going to do is select an antenna. So all of the switches, the commons, and all of this top row, actually that's going to be this braided wire that runs the whole way across all 20 switches, is going to connect to, from one, actually it looks like, okay, so yeah, actually that goes to the SWR meter, and then actually, interestingly enough, that's an out-of-the-box standalone SWR meter modified to work in this thing. But yeah, that comes down the output in. You can see the wires are just soldered straight into the jack. But that comes down to here, runs across the entire switch block, and then depending on which switch you have pushed in, then sends it up to each one of the 20 coax connectors. But then there's a matching set of switch contacts on the bottom side. So actually this is kind of cool. So which, with one exception, grounds. Yeah. But what it does is, so the positive lead goes up to this other rail, little white jumpers there you can see running across. That's going to daisy chain all of those switches together. So that's kind of cool. You can hook up 20 radios to this, turn all of them on, and when you enable an antenna, it will turn that radio on because it supplies power to it. You switch the next one on, it kills the power to that radio and turns the power on to the next, whichever button you've pressed next. So, yeah, that's kind of cool. You never have to turn your radio on and off again. You can just select from this front panel here which radio you want to listen to or use, push the button. Not only does it switch over the antenna, it would also switch the radio on. So, that's cool. Like I say, the only downfall I see to this is the ground. The ground lug goes to this chassis. So they're using the shield of the coax cables as the ground, which in old radios may have been fine because the chassis, so let's say this is a radio. The chassis on older radios, it was common for them to be at DC ground potential. But most of your, well, I don't even want to just say modern, but a lot of your solid state radios, 70s and 80s vintage even, the chassis is not at DC ground potential. That's chassis, that's considered what they call chassis ground. And then you have DC ground, or the circuit board ground inside the radio. So yeah, you'd almost need to run a ground wire up to each radio, or you could daisy chain your grounds at the radios. So, daisy chain them together, and then the only thing you'd need to run down here would be one ground. And I'd probably avoid hooking it up to this because your coax connectors, just like this, in the radio are attached to the chassis. You want to try and keep that separated, and you can end up with weird feedback problems and stuff if you go connecting the chassis directly to the ground. So, yeah, I probably wouldn't use that ground lug. Actually, it could be, but you'd need to isolate it like the positive is, put insulating washers in there. But, yeah, man, this is just too cool. Actually, what is that? Capital... I don't read upside down so well. Capital Danbury, Connecticut. So that's who made this switch assembly. But, yep, so there you go. And like I say, you can see what they did here. It's even got the wrinkle paint finish. So this is nothing more than basically an out-of-the-box SWR meter. It would have had a little cover slid over the back of it. But yeah, they just repurposed it and stuck it inside of a big box. Yep. So you can see there's the SWR bridge right there. There's the wires. So the antenna line goes through. But actually, it even has a jack on the side. So this may have had... they're probably using that. That was Where's that? It's got a diode attached to it. So that was actually, you could actually hook that up. Yeah, now that I think about it. I'm not going to, but you know, 'cause I don't want to go drilling any extra holes into this thing. I'd like to leak, because I've never seen one of these. But that would be for like a AM radio monitoring. So if you wanted to monitor your transmission, there's actually a diode hooked up down there, and that'll be end up eventually being hooked up to the antenna wire. But they use that diode just basically for very, very simple demodulation, you know, for a modulation monitor kind of. But yep, so there you go. That's what the inside of this thing looks like. Yeah, I saw this and I was like, oh, I got it. And it's heavy, man. I mean, this is some thick steel. I mean, this thing is definitely not flimsy. What do we got here? Good grief, 0.5 or 0.055. Yeah, that is some hefty metal, and you can see it's galvanized steel too. You can tell by the finish there. So there you go. There's a Lafayette what they call a communications control center. I'm almost curious. Maybe this wasn't even sold to the general public. Was this possibly, and you know, maybe somebody older than me that may be more familiar with Lafayette, because Lafayette, you have to remember. I don't. Maybe I'm just sitting here. I'm spitballing and, you know, brainstorming here. Yeah, I'm just wondering if maybe this was for dealers. That way they could hook up 20 radios in their store. Customer could walk up to this and go, you know, and you'd have a little sign. You'd have 20 radios up on the shelf, and they'd go, man, I like number 6. I want to hear what number 6 sounds like, and, you know, push number 6, and radio number 6 would fire up, and they could try it out. And they would, oh, maybe I'll try 13. But yeah, I'm wondering if maybe this was actually for like dealers, you know, for in-store displays. That way they could hook up one antenna, have 20 radios on display, and it would allow them to select between radios, so customers, you know, seems plausible. Like I say, I don't know for a fact. I've never seen one. But, yep, so there you go. That's the Lafayette CB Communications Control Center. I need to do it. It had some tape on it. I can see some, I don't know if it shows up in the camera or not, but there's a little bit of kind of tan, like gooey residue here, and you can see that the lettering's a little screwed up. I'll get that cleaned off, clean up all that smooshed up paint, and I'll actually repaint the letters, you know, fill that in so it looks like brand new, and get her cleaned up a little bit better. But yeah, I mean, that's nice silk screening on there. See, it almost had to be made by Lafayette. I just can't see someone, the expense, what it would cost to make this thing one-off, you know, with a custom silkscreen faceplate, just making one. I just can't see it. This almost has to be made by Lafayette. So there you go. In case you've never seen one, like I haven't, there you go. Now you've seen one and actually see what's on the inside. And man, if I ever find a bunch more of these things, I'll tell you what, I'm going to gobble up every single one I could get, because that would be sweet. I'd be able to... It's my only problem when you have a volume of radios like I do. You need a pile. You need a wall of these to connect to your 4 walls worth of radios so you can have them all hooked up at the same time. But there you go. Well, I thought, what the heck, I got her... Well, I had it apart. I cleaned all of the switch contacts, which, yes, oh my God, that took a while. Because there's not just 20 sets of switch contacts. There's 80 set of switch contacts. Because for the antenna, it has the direct connection, you know, from the main bus to the coax connectors on the back. And then when the buttons are out, any of the channels you're not using, it takes that to ground. That way you can't accidentally be sending a signal, you know, from a radio you're using into a radio that you're not using. And then the same thing on the lower set of switch contacts. There's 2 sets of switch contacts down there as well. So, yeah, whew, like I say, a lot of switch contacts to clean up. I got the faceplate cleaned up, got that glue residue off. The only thing I had to do now is just touch up the paint here, just a tiny bit right there. That's about the only thing it needs. But I thought I'd show it actually working, so I've got a pile of radios here. Actually, you can see there's a pile of 4 radios here. All belong to the same customer. He sent a bunch of radios in. I don't think they're all his. If I remember right, I think some of these might belong to some of his drivers. or maybe his son or something, but they all came in the same box, and this isn't even all of them. But this is a perfect example. You know, if you have a radio collection, not necessarily these black box exports, but, well, except for that one, that's a unit in. But, you know, you're like me, you have a collection of radios, and yeah, oh God, I gotta switch cables around and whatnot. Man, this thing makes it so easy. So, it's just as simple as hook up the power source to the back of this, hook up the power cords. Now, I did not connect the grounds to the ground in this, like I had said. I just have the grounds all connected together externally off of this, but the positives are attached to that terminal strip on the back, and then a coax connect cable goes from each radio down to, you know, an appropriate button. So you hit channel 1. So, very easy. So, shoot, I could have 20 radios hooked up, set to 20 different channels, and I could, you know, if I wanted to, and I could just switch. That's actually really nice. Not that it only switches the antenna. That's going to be really, like I say, for me, really handy that it also switches the power. Because, you know, if you have a lot of radios, that's a lot of power cable. Oh, God, how many can you hook up to a bus? Well, that's all taken care of. You can do all your voltage switching here, and then you don't even have to turn your radio off. And if you want all of them off, you just make sure all the buttons are out. Just that simple. Now there's no power going to any radio, but yep, so, yep, works good. So there you go. There's the Lafayette CB Communications Control Center. Well, look at that. I really like that. Man, this thing is just a tank, man. I mean, back when they made something, man, they made it to last, and last a long time. So, there you go. Like I said, I just thought I'd show it actually hooked up and actually doing what it's meant to do.